Okay, I want you to imagine a time when America was just exploding with change. It was this dizzying era of incredible new wealth and mind-blowing innovation. But at the same time, it was an era of deep, dark secrets hiding just below the surface. This was the Gilded Age, roughly from 1865 to 1898. And what we're going to do is peel back that shiny exterior to really get at the fierce conflict that was raging underneath.
You know, the name itself, which Mark Twain made famous, is the perfect clue. It's not the Golden Age, right? It's the Gilded Age. And that word gilded means something is just covered with a super thin layer of gold to hide something kind of worthless underneath. It's the perfect metaphor for this time, where this glittering surface of progress was masking some really deep, really ugly problems.
So, that's the big question we're going to tackle in this explainer. What was really going on beneath that golden veneer? Let's dive in and find out.
But first things first, we have to start with the golden part. We have to look at that shiny surface, because for a lot of people, the progress was absolutely real. This wasn't all just smoke and mirrors. Life was getting better in ways you could actually measure.
Now this is where it gets really interesting, because it's a huge paradox. Even while the gap between the super rich and everybody else was turning into a giant canyon, the average worker's dollar could actually buy more stuff than ever before. Real wages, so that's your paycheck after you account for the cost of things, were generally going up. And thanks to mass production, everything from shoes to tools to furniture was getting cheaper.
And here's a perfect example of what that looked like. Companies like Sears and Montgomery Ward completely changed the game with their mail-order catalogs. All of a sudden, if you lived out in the middle of nowhere, you weren't stuck with whatever the one expensive local store had. You could flip through this massive book, order almost anything you could dream of, and have it delivered. This was a real, tangible boost in buying power for millions of families.
Okay, so we've seen the promise, right? A better life through more stuff. But now we've got to flip that gilded coin over and look at the other side. The massive, growing chasm between the ultra-wealthy elite and the working people who are actually powering the whole system. And this is the absolute key to understanding everything. Being able to buy a slightly cheaper coat is one thing, but that does not mean you're financially secure. This simple idea is what separates the appearance of progress from the often brutal reality for most workers. And I mean, you couldn't have two more different realities happening at the same time. On one side, you've got this elite class, so rich they were totally insulated from any economic problems, they were literally building palaces just for fun. And on the other side, you've got the working class living on a knife's edge. One missed paycheck, one accident at the factory, and your whole world could fall apart. This era basically invented what the economist Thorstein Veblen called conspicuous consumption. That's spending a ridiculous amount of money, not because you need something, but just to show off how insanely rich you are. And there is no better example than the Vanderbilts' Biltmore House. This was a vacation home, a 175,000 square foot mansion with 43 bathrooms. I mean, come on, this wasn't about having a place to stay. It was a performance of wealth on a scale that was just unimaginable to the people who actually built it. And while the Vanderbilts were safe and sound in their palaces, what happened to the workers when the economy crashed, like it did in 1873 and again in 1893? Well, their access to cheaper goods meant absolutely nothing. Wages were slashed, jobs disappeared overnight, and there was no unemployment, no social security, no safety net at all. You were completely, totally on your own.
So you can imagine this intense feeling of insecurity, combined with the awful reality of life on the factory floor, it had to lead somewhere. As an individual, you had zero power, so workers were pretty much forced to organize together. And when you see the conditions they were facing, you'll get exactly why.
Let's not sugarcoat this. Industrial work during the Gilded Age was a nightmare. Safety rules, basically non-existent. The rates of injury and death in factories, in mines, on the railroads, they were terrifyingly high. Workers took on all the risk of this new industrial world with almost no protection.
And it wasn't just adults. Child labor was everywhere. By the end of the 19th century, take a guess, what percentage of industrial workers do you think were children? The answer is just staggering. Nearly 18%. Almost 1 in 5. We're talking about kids, some as young as 10 years old, facing the exact same dangers as adults for a tiny fraction of the pay.
So you might be thinking, oh, why didn't they just quit or ask for better pay? Because as one person, you were seen as a totally disposable part. If you complained, if you got hurt, if you asked for a raise, you were just fired. There was always someone else, often a new immigrant who was desperate for any kind of job, standing right there to take your place. This crushing power imbalance meant that coming together, collective action was really the only option they had.
And that collective action really took two different shapes. On one side, you had the Knights of Labor. You can think of them as the big-picture dreamers. They welcomed pretty much everyone, skilled and unskilled workers, women, African Americans, and their goal was huge, to completely transform the entire system. Then you have the American Federation of Labor, the AFL. They were the pragmatists. They only focused on skilled craft workers, and their goals were much more concrete: get higher wages and safer conditions within the system we already have. Two very different playbooks for the same fight.
And it wasn't just those two big groups either. The Colored National Labor Union fought specifically for black workers, connecting the dots between economic justice and the fight for civil rights in land. And out in the Southwest, you had groups like Las Coras Blancas, or the Whitecaps, who used direct action, like literally cutting the barbed wire fences of wealthy landowners, to fight back. So this struggle was happening on a lot of different fronts.
Okay, so you have these two massive forces, organized labor and concentrated corporate power, on a collision course. Things were bound to get ugly. But now we get to maybe the most critical piece of the whole puzzle. When push came to shove, whose side did the government take?
When you look at the timeline of the biggest conflicts, a pattern just jumps right out at you. In 1877, during the Great Railroad Strike, what did President Hayes do? He didn't negotiate, he sent in federal troops, and over 100 striking workers were killed. In 1886, the Haymarket Affair was used to stir up this massive anti-labor panic that basically destroyed the Knights of Labor. And in 1894, with the Pullman strike, President Cleveland sent in troops again, using the excuse of protecting the mail, to crush the strike and throw its leader in jail. Time after time after time, the government picked a side, and it wasn't the workers.
The message could not have been any clearer. In these huge showdowns, the federal government consistently, and often violently, stepped in on the side of business. The rights of a corporation and its property were treated as more important than the rights and even the lives of working people. Force was the government's final answer to labor's demands.
So, let's pull all of this together. What does the Gilded Age really teach us about progress and wealth and fairness?
Here's the big takeaway. That shiny surface of material progress, being able to buy more stuff, doesn't fix deep, fundamental problems of fairness. During the Gilded Age, you had this booming consumer culture living right alongside brutal inequality, and that inequality was actively being enforced by the power of the government. The gilding was just a distraction from the rot underneath.
And that leaves us with a really powerful question that still echoes today. When a society tells its people that progress means buying more things, but the system that makes those things is built on an inequality that the government itself enforces, well, how inevitable is conflict? It's a question that was forged in the fire of the Gilded Age, and it's one we're still grappling with.